Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman from Georgia for yielding me the customary 30 minutes and for his riveting presentation, and I yield myself such time as I may consume. Before I say a word about the rule or the bills in front of us, this is the first full day that we have convened since 2 federal officers shot and killed another American citizen in Minneapolis, Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse who took care of our nation's veterans. Alex was on a public street. He was exercising his First Amendment rights while filming federal agents. He was exercising his Second Amendment rights as a law-abiding concealed carry gun owner. He was doing what any decent person would do, helping a woman off the ground after she'd been shoved down by a federal officer. And for that, he was punished with death, shot by his own government. This wasn't an isolated tragedy, Mr. Speaker. It was the second public killing of an innocent American in Minneapolis tied to Homeland Security. Renee Good, a mother of 3, was shot by ICE on January 7th, mere weeks before the murder of Alex Preddy. Mr. Speaker, as co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, named after our former colleague, the only Holocaust survivor to serve in the United States Congress, I have spent years documenting and standing up to human rights abuses carried out by authoritarian regimes against their own people. So let me say this plainly. A functioning democracy does not execute people in the street. That's the kind of thing you see in North Korea or Iran, not in the United States of America. It is beyond the pale. And in my view, this administration and those at the Department of Homeland Security in particular should not get another cent until there are some serious actions taken. I personally believe we should abolish ICE and start all over. But at a minimum, there needs to be some serious systemic reforms made. Which brings us to today's rule debate. Over the weekend, the Senate acted on the government funding bills House Republicans sent them 2 weeks ago, except for a short-term CR that continues DHS funding at the current levels for the next week and a half. And I want to be crystal clear about where I stand. I'm voting no. I'm voting no. I will not stand by and give any more money to Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem to bankroll an out-of-control operation that is terrorizing communities and shredding the Constitution. We are watching masked, armed agents force their way into homes without judicial warrants. We are seeing blatant violations of the Fourth Amendment. We are witnessing agencies act with impunity. We are hearing about kids getting kidnapped on their way to school and grandparents dragged from their homes. And we are listening as government officials smear dead Americans as domestic terrorists instead of answering basic questions about what happened. So I am not interested in business as usual. Not for 2 more weeks, not for 2 more seconds. A federal judge recently described ICE's conduct in January as an extraordinary pattern of defiance of court orders. They said ICE, and let me quote, likely violated more court orders in January of 2026 than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence, end quote. That should give every single member of this House pause. It's certainly my red line, and I think it ought to be a red line for this whole body. And Mr. Speaker, it's not just DHS funding. This package also gives a massive increase in funding to the Pentagon. Why are we writing a blank check for the so-called Department of War while this administration threatens allies, breaks the law, and treats Congress like an afterthought? Why are we giving Pete Hegseth more money than the administration even asked for, while we get fewer answers, fewer guardrails, and fewer constraints on reckless action? And on top of all of this, Republicans have jammed in a measure to repeal D.C.'s new tax law. Let me just tell my colleagues, this would blow a $600 million hole in D.C.'s budget. Over $500 million gone because Republicans in Congress want to meddle in local governance when they can't even manage a budget of their own. I mean, They just added $4 trillion. That's $4 trillion to the national debt in their one big ugly bill. Let that sink in. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the mayor and the chairman of the D.C. Council warned that this would throw a huge wrench into D.C.'s current tax filing season and force people to refile their taxes. That is insane. And if this bill becomes law, they would be ripping away D.C.'s new child tax credit, money that would go directly to families to help them put food on the table and reduce childhood poverty. I mean, Republicans talk a big game about family values, and then they turn around and take money out of kids' pockets. It is shameful. And by the way, you can't make this stuff up, but this measure had no hearing and no markup. So much for regular order. And when I asked the Oversight Committee chairman yesterday basic questions about D.C.'s budget, basic questions, he had no answers. He had no idea how big D.C.'s budget is, or how much D.C. spends on the metro, schools, or infrastructure improvements, or how much money D.C. raises in local taxes, and how much of a budget shortfall their outrageous bill would cause. These are the most basic questions that you could possibly ask about whether to overturn D.C.'s tax law, and he couldn't answer them, had no clue. So let's be honest about what this is. Powerful people in Washington telling local communities, sit down, shut up, we know better, and then leaving working people to clean up the mess. And the final bill in this rule is another massive giveaway to mining CEOs and polluters, and that lets them gut their own regulations. It's the same pattern. It's the same pattern every single time. More power for the strong, more pain for the vulnerable, more protection for insiders, and more excuses for lawlessness. Enough is enough. Mr. Speaker, I'm voting no on this rule and no on this underlying package and no on all these bills, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I enjoyed the passionate speech from the gentleman from Massachusetts, but I wonder aloud if the gentleman has such passion for some of the criminals who our federal law enforcement have apprehended in Minnesota during their most recent operations. For instance, our federal law enforcement arrested a criminal illegal alien from Somalia with a record of multiple counts of credit card fraud, drug possession, controlled substance possession, and drug trafficking. By the way, this criminal was issued a final order of removal in 2022. Of course, that never was enacted under the previous administration, but I wonder if the gentleman has as much passion about that illegal alien that has committed many, many crimes. A criminal alien from Laos was also apprehended with 3 prior convictions for selling drugs, as well as convictions for assault and contributing to a minor's delinquency. The criminal was issued a final order of removal in 2009, but here we are. Likewise, the law enforcement in Minnesota arrested a criminal illegal alien from Mexico, previously arrested for child cruelty and battery. I wonder if the gentleman stands with that criminal illegal alien as well, and we'll surely see in further debate. But in the meantime, I yield 5 minutes to the gentlelady from North Carolina, the distinguished Rules Committee Chairwoman, Chairwoman Fox.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague from Georgia for yielding. Mr. Speaker, yesterday at the Rules Committee, I offered my sentiments as to why we must pass all the underlying measures that are being considered under this rule. For our rule debate here today, I'll touch upon the appropriations measure that's under consideration. So that the record is crystal clear, not once did the People's House court a government shutdown during the appropriations process. The various subcommittees of the Appropriations Committee did their jobs. They worked collaboratively to deliver to the full House their recommendations. As Chairman Cole said more than once in the Rules Committee, these appropriators knew their subject matter better than anyone else and presented to the rest of us their best effort. Then the House did its job. We've passed all 12 appropriations bills and sent them to the Senate, which had negotiated with their House counterparts and agreed to take what had been produced in the House. In doing so, we plowed a path toward regular order that was sorely overdue. Unfortunately, the Senate reneged on the agreement. The Senate did not pass what it had agreed to pass and instead made a change after the House completed its work. That delay on the part of the Senate caused the government to shut down. Now, what the Senate should have done was approve the six-bill appropriations package that was negotiated in good faith. This process should have been over and done with by now. We don't have time to be playing games, Mr. Speaker. Now, I wholeheartedly echo the sentiment offered by Chairman Cole that doing the right thing for the American people is something that does not get old. Congress holds an explicit mandate that's outlined in our Article 1 responsibilities to appropriate funding for the missions of departments across the government. When we fail to uphold that mandate, we fail to serve the American people. We fail to do right by them. We must bring the appropriations process to a close. We must move forward and complete more work in service to the American people. I support the rule and the underlying measures, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we reserve. Thank you.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I want to respond to the gentleman from Georgia who comes down here with the same old tired MAGA talking points when it comes to ICE and Homeland Security. He comes down here to confuse people, to somehow imply that Democrats don't want to lock up violent criminals. On the contrary, we do. And that's what we were promised, that the worst of the worst would be pursued and would be held accountable. But that's not what's happening. That is not what is happening. In Minnesota, ICE agents have been intimidating people at hospitals, forcing hospital management to issue protocols for employees on how to best engage. Our doctors and nurses ought to be focused on tending to patients and not dealing with ICE agents. It's despicable. I mean, agents showed up to a Minnesota hospital with a man who immigrated here legally. Just 4 hours after his arrest, he had at least 8 skull fractures. 8! In addition to life-threatening brain hemorrhages. And when people have exercised their First Amendment rights to protest, ICE meets them with only more abuse, beating peaceful protesters and dousing them in pepper spray. And, Mr. Speaker, we have all heard by now the horrifying story of Alex Preddy, an innocent American citizen, an intensive care nurse who was brutally murdered by federal agents. This wasn't an isolated incident. The administration has shot 13 people during immigration enforcement operations since September. And I'm going to say again, 13 people have been shot by the Department of Homeland Security. 4 of those shootings were fatal. That's 4 people who would be with us today if not for the insane administration's cruel oppression of our communities. I mean, ICE agents are not protecting our borders. They're ambushing our communities, decimating our families, and taking innocent lives. Mr. Speaker, Republicans nearly tripled ICE's budget last summer with their big, ugly bill. And all that money ought to be clawed back. And as far as the appropriations package before us, again, I refuse to send another cent to Stephen Miller or Kristi Noem. She ought to be impeached, and he ought to be fired immediately. They are undermining our Constitution, and the department that they run is murdering American citizens on the street. We are hearing about young children being kidnapped. We are hearing about off-duty police officers being detained by ICE. We are hearing about ICE going after people because of the color of their skin. I mean, that is what we object to. Yeah, let's go after the criminals. By the way, we're not the party that pardoned all the insurrectionists on January 6th and said that, slate is clean. By the way, those people went on to go on to murder innocent people, to rape women, and to molest children. So there is a difference here. We want to go after the violent criminals, those who have committed terrible crimes. That's what we were promised, and we were lied to. And so we've had it. I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It sure seems like the gentleman from Massachusetts is using a whole set of left-wing talking points himself, but I am curious, and rather we should probably check the transcript. I do appreciate the gentleman from Massachusetts for applauding federal law enforcement's efforts to apprehend and prosecute and subject to our system of justice some of the worst criminals in our country. So I do appreciate that sentiment, but with that I will yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, who I may add is a champion debater, so I wish my colleagues on the other side of the aisle best wishes.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my good friend, Representative, for asking me to do that. I think you've raised the expectations here, so we'll see what I can do. You know, I've been in Congress now for 10 months, and this is the second time the government has been shut down. And what is similar in them both is the reason. Because Democrats have put the priorities of illegal immigrants over the priorities of the people that we swore an oath to protect. That is, the American citizens. A few months ago, the shutdown was to try to give illegal immigrants free health care. And now the shutdown is simply over whether they should go home. What we're dealing with is a fetishization of illegal immigrants that I simply can't understand. Sometimes I think it's delusion, that they live in a world of sunshine and rainbows and pixie dust and unicorns, where anyone who wants should be able to come to the United States, that everyone is good, that no one causes a problem, that they can get all the free stuff they want, they can vote in our elections, and everything will work out just fine. But that's not how it works. We hear a lot about the 2 Americans who were killed, and it is unfortunate that that happened. But what I would note is if they had been staying away from law enforcement while law enforcement was doing their job, which is to round up and send home people who are in our country illegally, who have been told to leave and refuse to do so, nothing would have happened to them. But you know who they don't talk about? The estimated 500 Americans that are killed each year by an illegal immigrant. Why do we not know their names? What about their families? Those 500 people, that's 500 families whose lives are destroyed, 500 spouses and mothers and fathers and children who are dead because of someone who should not have even been here. That's who I swore an oath to protect. But let's make no mistake what this is about. Democrats do not care about illegal immigrants. They don't care at all. What this is about is political power. That is what this is about. Because the states that they run, real Americans, actual Americans, people who should be able to vote in our country, are fleeing in droves. U-Haul businesses going through the roof in places like New York and California. And they're moving to my state of Florida. And as Americans leave these horribly run states that do not cooperate with law enforcement, where they release these criminals out onto the streets, the only way they can retain power is to import illegal immigrants to try to hold on to their seats in this House, to try to hold on to their federal funding, and to try to hold on to their elections. That is what this debate is about. So I believe that we need to move forward today, because all this vote is right now is a vote on whether to discuss and vote on whether to reopen the government. Now, I will be honest, there are things in the underlying appropriations bills that make my stomach churn. But I believe we have an obligation to the American people to have that debate and to have that vote. And to vote against the rule means you do not believe the American people should even have the possibility of having that government reopened again. I came here to fight to make sure there are not another 500 families next year, and 500 the year after, and 500 the year after. We need to get the government reopened, we need to get our folks back to work, and we need to be focused not on illegal immigrants, not on people who shouldn't be here, but those who should and have the right to be and have the right to be safe. That's why I'll be voting for the rule today, and I hope all of my colleagues do as well. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, we reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, the Florida man who just spoke characterized the murder of 2 Americans by ICE agents as unfortunate. It's not unfortunate. It's goddamn unacceptable. And everybody should be outraged by that. And he also bragged about the fact that he's been in Congress for 10 months and the government has been shut down twice. I hate to be the one to remind the gentleman, but the last time I checked, his party is in control of everything. The White House, the Senate, and the House. You run the show. So maybe November will be a month of reckoning. Let's hope so, for the sake of this country. Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to make an order, amendment number 47, to Senate amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 7148, which would allow for an up or down vote on whether to cut the $75 billion Republicans gave ICE in their big ugly bill and use those funds to undo some of the big ugly bill's disastrous health care cuts. Mr. Speaker, last year Republicans voted to kick more than 15 million people off their health care. 15 million Americans they chose to kick off health care through an over $1 trillion cut to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Republicans claimed that this was for deficit reduction, but we know that wasn't true. That was a lie. According to the nonpartisan budget experts at the Congressional Budget Office, their big ugly bill added $4 trillion to the national debt, in part by giving ICE boatloads of cash to run roughshod through American cities with zero safeguards. This must end. If Democrats defeat the previous question, we will offer an amendment to repurpose these ICE funds toward lowering health care costs, which Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins voted for just last week. So I challenge my Republican colleagues in this body to do the same. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment into the record along with any extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question. And to discuss our proposal, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Rhode Island, the sponsor of this amendment, Mr. Amo.
Without objection, gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Ranking Member McGovern. Republicans are trying yet again to write a blank check for ICE while American families struggle to afford the basics. If we defeat the previous question, we can claw back the $75 billion in the ICE slush fund that Trump and Republicans established with their big ugly law and redirect that money to where it belongs, lowering health care costs. Because in that same bill, Republicans cut more than $1 trillion from our health care system, jeopardizing millions of Americans. Reclaiming this $75 billion from ICE would prevent 700,000 Americans from losing their health insurance. That's 700,000 Americans protected. That's 700,000 Americans being spared from choosing between seeing a doctor or paying rent or paying for their groceries. This is a simple question of our values. Taxpayer dollars should be used to care for people, not to fund mass agents terrorizing our communities, spreading panic, making us less safe, and killing people. Instead of lowering costs, Republicans poured billions into DHS, an agency spreading chaos and making choices with deadly consequences, all while ignoring the needs of working families. That tells you what their priorities are. But everyone in this chamber has a chance to decide today. Do you want to lower costs and protect 700,000 Americans receiving Medicaid? Or fund Trump's domestic masked army of terror? It's that simple. And here's the kicker. This effort was bipartisan in the Senate when Senator Sanders introduced it. Democrats and Republicans agreed that we should cut the ICE slush fund to protect Medicaid. It should be bipartisan here, too. I hope Republicans make the right choice, but my expectations are pretty low. I hope the American people are listening. They're most certainly watching on their screens every night. This vote is about using taxpayer dollars to lower costs for Americans over fueling the fear that persists in our cities. It's about caring for our neighbors when they're sick over sending masked agents to terrorize our communities. It really is that simple. Choose care over cruelty. I urge a no vote and yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope in the spirit of respectful discourse, the gentleman from Massachusetts maintains standards of decorum on the floor and no longer takes the Lord's name in vain. But since he did invoke the gentleman from Florida with respect to procedure and as it relates to our ability to actually run the show, to use his words, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Representative Fine.
Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Representative Jack. I would just point out we don't run the show. I wish we did. And perhaps the gentleman from Massachusetts wants to work with me to encourage the Senate to get rid of the filibuster. Because we have to tell the truth in this process. And if we could pass this budget with 51 votes and we didn't, then that point would be valid and that criticism would be just. But we don't have 60 votes in the Senate. We are reliant on Democrats to join us in order to get it over the finish line. Now, a deal was cut, apparently, where we made a deal that we said we'll pass all of these bills as one package, and Republicans voted for things they didn't like because allegedly Democrats in the Senate would go along at the end. But as sometimes happens, people don't keep their word. And so that package that was negotiated, that was agreed upon, that was a compromise between all parties, failed to pass. But what we must agree upon, what we must stay, and what is absolutely true, is that we don't control the show in the Senate. Last thing I would say is this. It was brought up that how I spoke about those tragedies in Minnesota. And I did. But we need to be careful, because when we talk about people being murdered in Minnesota because they were lawfully carrying a gun using their Second Amendment rights, we are belying decades of concealed carry classes that tell people who are carrying guns how they should behave around law enforcement. Now, I know Democrats generally hate guns, and probably none of them carry concealed. But as someone who does and who has many friends who do, you're told not to confront physically law enforcement when you're carrying that gun, which is exactly what happened here. Now, do I wish he hadn't died? I absolutely do. But we have to be careful because we don't want more of that to happen. And when we say he did nothing wrong, we're setting the stage for more of that to happen. These words matter. We have to tell the truth, whether it's the deaths of Preddy and Good or whether Republicans actually control the show in the Senate. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Georgia.
We reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Boy, Mr. Speaker, I'm confused. I mean, the gentleman wants to say that the Republicans are not in control, even though they control the White House, the House, and the Senate. But yet the Republicans were in control to throw 15 million people off of health care. The Republicans were in control to add $4 trillion to the debt. The Republicans are in control to cut Medicaid by $1 trillion. The Republicans are in control to give ICE, unlimited amounts of money with no guardrails. So, I mean, and now they're telling us they're not in control? I mean, I'm confused. Let me just say this. You can't have it both ways. And again, I hope that the Republican control of this House and of this Senate is short-lived, because, quite frankly, this country cannot stand another 2 years of this. Where if you're rich and you're well-connected and you're a friend of the president, you get all kinds of sweetheart deals. But if you're not, if you're a hard-working, middle-class family, you get screwed. People have had it. People have had it. They see through this. But to say that you're not in control when you've been cutting programs that have helped poor children, that have helped middle-class families, when you've given tax breaks to multi-millionaires and billionaires, give me a break. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Mississippi, the distinguished ranking member of the Committee on Homeland Security, Mr. Thompson.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the time from the gentleman from Massachusetts. Mr. Speaker, Congress must not give ICE or CBP another dollar while they are killing Americans in our streets. We must protect our communities by demanding real change first. This is what our constituents elected us to do. As a starting point, the federal occupation of Minneapolis must end immediately. ICE must adhere to the Constitution and use only judicial warrants for its enforcement operation. Instead, just last week, ICE directed its officers to conduct more arrests without any warrants at all. DHS law enforcement officers must clearly be identifiable and prohibited from hiding behind masks. Racial profiling in immigration enforcement must stop. Sensitive locations like schools, daycare, hospitals, and churches must be protected. We must rein in the sweeping surveillance system DHS is using to crack down on Americans. CBP personnel must also go back to the border. The federal government must cooperate with state and local investigators in investigations, including the murders of Renee Good and Alex Prady. I've been an elected official, Mr. Speaker, like you have, in the state of Mississippi. Never have I seen an opportunity where federal, state, and local law enforcement didn't cooperate together on finding criminals. ICE has taken this to another level, and we're a better country than this. And Mr. Speaker, Kristi Noem must go. She has endangered the security of the United States, its people, and our institution of government. Again, vote no on the rule and the underlying bill so we can hold the Trump administration accountable. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Georgia.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's important to remember that we stand in the midst of the second government shutdown. And I just have a question for the gentlemen from Massachusetts and Mississippi. Because we are in a shutdown today, and this vote is a vote that will help us end this shutdown later this afternoon, I'm curious, for how long are you prepared to block our military members from receiving not just their salary, but also the hard-earned pay raise? For how long are you willing to withhold the dues that are owed to the people that protect us? And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I thought the gentleman was asking me a question, but we would have a conversation. I will tell you, we don't want to shut down. We want you to reel in an out-of-control ICE agency that are killing American citizens right before our very eyes. That's what we want. And I don't understand for the life of me why that's such a heavy lift for my Republican friends. But that's what we're asking for. We don't want to shut the government down. We don't, that's not who we are. By the way, again, Republicans are responsible for the last shutdown. You went on vacation rather than stay in Washington to try to negotiate a deal. But here we are. All we're asking for is let's reel in this out-of-control agencies, and and my friends find that too difficult to comprehend. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Frankel.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I support the 5 bills that received bipartisan support, but I cannot vote for a package that includes funding for the Department of Homeland Security without immediate action to stop the ongoing violation of human rights and law by ICE that have turned into thugs and has turned our country, America, into a place that many of us don't recognize. Donald Trump promised to take violent criminals off the street, but instead, his immigration enforcement has become a campaign of cruelty against peaceful people, tearing families apart, hollowing out businesses, and paralyzing neighborhoods with pepper spray and fear. And the crisis is national in scope, not just the headlines of the cold-blooded murders in Minnesota. The Department of Homeland Security has detained hundreds of thousands of decent people this year, often in unspeakable conditions and without a fair process. And that includes over 10,000 people in my home state of Florida. A mother nursing her baby torn away from her child. Largely good, decent mothers and fathers, workers who contribute to our communities. And yeah, we do need to take the time for bipartisan immigration reform. But today, we must rein in ICE. And that includes ending mass enforcement, roving patrols, requiring judicial warrants, mandating body cameras, ending total immunity, and repurposing the billions of dollars that are being used to menace our communities. Security does not require brutality. Enforcement does not require lawlessness. And our immigration policy should reflect our values, not force us to abandon them. We can secure our borders without terrorizing our neighbors, and I will not support funding that enables cruelty. Congress must act now. Impeach Kristi Noem and rein in ICE. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, I think it's important to note the reason why we're here today is because Senate Democrats, along with some Senate Republicans, advanced legislation that enables us to fund the government. So I do find it interesting that our colleagues in the House here are so adamantly opposed to funding our government when 20 of their colleagues in the Senate, in their own party, not only support giving our troops a pay raise, but support paying and funding our government as it rightfully should be because of all the wins that President Trump has accomplished thus far. But I am curious, Mr. Speaker, with respect to this vote today, I hear over and over again commentary on ICE and operations therein, but again, no one has addressed the fact that today we are voting to pay our service members. It's a very simple vote. You can either vote yes to pay them or no to withhold payment and funds to them, and I'm just waiting for somebody to answer why that seems to be a bargaining chip that some of our colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle continue to deploy at the expense of our service members. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, I would just say to the gentleman, unfortunately, under the Republican rule, we don't have regular order anymore. We should be debating appropriation bills one at a time. They bunch everything together. And by the way, not only do they bunch things together, they don't even call for amendments anymore. This is the most closed Congress in history. This is the Rules Committee, and this House of Representatives has become a place where democracy goes to die. My friend should be ashamed of what they are doing to this institution. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Fletcher.
Gentlewoman is recognized from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, in the nearly 2 weeks since the House last met, people across America witnessed the execution of another American citizen, Alex Preddy, by agents of the United States government, Border Patrol agents operating far from the border in Minneapolis. People across the country watched in horror as federal agents executed him and then immediately tried to assassinate his character, lying about who he is and what he was doing. The American people see through these lies, just as they see that this administration is taking actions every single day against its own people that are unconstitutional, un-American, and unconscionable. Everywhere, people are talking about it. In our House Democratic Caucus, we're talking about what we can do about it. The only place that we're not talking about it is here, in this chamber, on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. As Mr. McGovern just noted, once again, the Republicans that control what comes to the floor blocked any amendments to the bill, stopping not just the policy proposed, but the policy debate about the potential solutions and the problems that they address altogether. And now they say we'll address them in 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, we don't need 2 weeks. We don't have 2 weeks. When Americans are being killed, detained, harassed, and silenced by their government, there should be no higher priority for the U.S. House of Representatives than for the entire Congress than protecting the people that we represent and protecting the Constitution that gives us all of our rights. It is being violated daily by this administration and by officials who have sworn an oath to protect it, just as we have as members of Congress. But we are not doing that here today, and that's why I'm voting no on this rule and urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Georgia.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our Democrat colleagues have tried to distract from the historic achievements reached in 2025 by mischaracterizing the work of the House Committee on Rules with weaponized statistics taken out of context. I would like to remind my colleagues that barely over a third, or 37%, of rules this Congress have been closed at the discretion of the Committee on Rules, meaning for the vast majority of closed rules, there were not any amendments that could even be made in order. My friends all across the aisle, particularly my friend from Massachusetts, all too well knows the often Herculean tasks required of the Rules Committee and the difficult discussions when deliberating amendment decisions. The Rules majority believes in meaningful lawmaking, not partisan messaging exercises. We do not need to come up with partisan messaging amendments at the last minute in order to scare or rather score political points or manufacture floor fights, but instead focus on advancing thoughtful, substantive legislation like the measures before us today through a fair and transparent process. And I also want to note, as I understand it, under my Democrat colleagues' stewardship of the Committee on Rules, he mentions abolishing tradition or what have you. Well, I think it's helpful to note, Mr. Speaker, that under his leadership of the Committee on Rules, they abolished the centuries-old tradition of the motion to recommit with instructions. I think we would all benefit from an explanation of abolishing that centuries-old tradition and a right of the minority. I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, a lot of words to justify the most closed Congress in history. 83% of the rules have been closed. 8 out of 10. You don't even call for amendments anymore. And people know that it's a waste of time to come to the Rules Committee because you already tipped them off. There are going to be no amendments in order. And 90% of Democratic amendments have been rejected. And a big chunk of Republican amendments have been rejected. I'm sorry that your rank and file are such cheap dates when it comes to legislating, but they cave all the time and they vote for these crappy rules that are totally closed. So that's a bunch of bullshit. Let's be honest. That's what we're talking about here. That is just that's not an accurate assessment of what is going on here. I mean, this is the most closed Congress in history. You should be ashamed. I reserve.
I want to remind members about using profanity during debate. Gentleman's recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. First and foremost, I think when your arguments are hollow, that's when you revert to foul language, and I think that's evident as we've seen today. But again, I asked the question, Mr. Speaker, to the American people, and I hope that they demand an answer. Under the gentleman from Massachusetts stewardship of the Committee on Rules, they abolished a centuries-old tradition during the 117th Congress. I think we would all welcome, we are debating, in fact, procedure today. I think we would all welcome an explanation of that horrific abolishment of committee procedure. I reserve.
Reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, and Mr. Speaker, I just want to remind my Republican friends who just kind of go along to get along. I mean, Mr. Arrington, who's a chairman, 71% of his amendments have been blocked. I mean, I could write down the list. Congresswoman Mace, 76% of her amendments have been. Stubbe, 79% have been blocked. I go right down the list. These are all Republicans who just routinely get blocked. So, I mean, enough. This is a ridiculous argument. The bottom line is a lot of words to justify the most closed Congress in history, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia.
We reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
May I ask the gentleman how many more speakers he has on his side? Hold on. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from New Mexico, Ms. Ledger.
Gentlelady from New Mexico, got 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak up against Kristi Noem's Department of Homeland Security. And speaking up is what we must do when we see that the Constitution is violated and the moral fabric of our nation is brutalized the same way they are brutalizing our communities and killing our citizens. Whether it's in New Mexico or Minnesota, fear has become a policy for ICE and CBP, and cruelty has become their strategy as they take money that is taxpayer money that could be used for affordable housing, for health care, for bringing down the cost of living, and they are spending it to terrorize our community. Following the Constitution, respecting the First, Fourth, and 14th Amendment should not be optional. It should never be up for a negotiation. We should make it a requirement and make sure that they do not have immunity, because then they act with impunity. And we should not give another penny to the Department of Homeland Security until we get accountability. And with that, I urge that we vote against this rule, and I yield back.
Massachusetts.
I reserve.
You reserve?
We're
Gentleman from Georgia.
We're prepared to close.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield myself the remaining time, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, listening to the debate by my Republican colleagues, I know Republicans want to pretend like they're not in control because that absolves them of responsibility and accountability. They don't want to own their own record because they know their record sucks. They want to pretend like they're not in control because then they'll because if they pretend like they're in control, if they acknowledge that they're in control, then they'll be held accountable in November. Now look what they've promised and compare it to what they've done so far. Tax breaks for billionaires, they make sure their big donors are taken care of while they screw over regular people. $40 billion to Argentina, hurting our farmers and ranchers, importing more beef from South America, bombing Venezuela, threatening to invade NATO allies. Meanwhile, prices are not down, prices are up because of their stupid tariffs and lousy economic policies. They promised to release all the Epstein files. They still haven't done that. In fact, they're covering up for the President of the United States. And people are struggling more than ever because Trump's economy sucks. They are making it easier for the elites, easier for the billionaires, easier for the Epstein class, and harder for everybody else. Maybe that's why even Republicans are finally acknowledging MAGA was all a lie. Of course, their members only acknowledge that after they leave. But let's listen to Trump's former top ally, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And here's what she said, and I quote, "I think people are realizing it was all a lie. It was a big lie for the people. What MAGA is really serving in this administration, who they're serving is their big donors," end quote. Look at who Republicans have helped. They have been in charge for a year. They've helped big oil. They've helped big banks. They've helped big tech. Look who was in the front row at Trump's inauguration. Billionaires. That's all he cares about. And look at their promises to go after, quote, the worst of the worst when it comes to immigration. Another broken promise. Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem are not going after the worst of the worst. They're going after kids, VA nurses. They're deporting veterans, for God's sake. And so we are sick and tired of the broken promises and the lies. Enough. I talk to Republican colleagues all the time who privately confess to me that this is a disaster. And then they come on the floor and then they talk to the press and say everything is beautiful. That's just not reality. This president and this administration is taking this country in the wrong direction. We have people that are being murdered in our streets by U.S. federal agents. When is enough going to be enough? I mean, I can't believe this. Go along to get along. I get it. Everybody over there is afraid of the guy in the White House. But maybe you should be more afraid of your constituents. Maybe you ought to listen to your constituents because they're sick and tired of this BS. They've had it. They want Congress to be a body that fights for them, that fights to improve the quality of life for average people. They want this body to be a place where we debate important issues passionately and we skip all the crazy debates we have on trivial matters. We can do so much better. We can do so much better. But it requires, my friends on the other side of the aisle, to kind of grow a spine, to stand up and to say and do the right thing. This is nuts what's happening. People being murdered in our streets, federal agents crashing into people's homes without a judicial warrant, former off-duty police officers being detained by ICE. I mean, people with brown and black skin being detained routinely by ICE. This has to stop. And Mr. Speaker, I urge all my colleagues to vote no on this rule. Let's get to the negotiating table. Let's do something to reel in this out of control agency. But going along to get along is no longer an option. I yield back my time.